die.
It's pretty safe on like
damn. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be working on getting this engine back into Legacy here. It's the same Legacy that we've been doing the other work to, like the steering rack and the rear sway bar work, and a little history on this car. I actually picked this up about 2 years ago now for 50 bucks. When I got it, the engine was out of the car. They thought maybe it had bad head gaskets or something. Not really sure if that was really what was going on, but anyways, got this engine for free off a buddy of mine. Did the timing belt, water pump, got it cleaned up, and we're gonna throw this in and hopefully get it running pretty soon. When you're installing one of these engines in these cars, you want to make sure that you jack the transmission up a little bit off the cross member, because you need to slide the engine into the transmission first. You got these threaded bolts or studs sticking out here, and those have to slide into the lower holes in the transmission first before you can drop it down onto the cross member right here. And you need to make sure there's enough room for the studs on the engine mounts to clear over the cross member. Also, if you're working on an automatic like this, line up the mounting holes on the torque converter in about this position here, so that it lines up with this little window that you have here to bolt the torque converter up to your flex plate. So make sure you do that first, so you're not trying to get in through this little tiny opening and rotate the torque converter after the engine's already bolted up against the transmission. That'll just make things a lot easier. Also, I'd recommend having your engine like this one is now without the intake manifold on. Again, that'll make it easier to access this hole here to get the torque converter lined up. And it's really no easier having the intake manifold on when the engine's out of the car. It's real easy to work on it when it's sitting in here. So I would just leave that off until you've gotten the engine in the car, and then put the intake manifold on last. So something else to watch out for, now you got the engine just about in here touching the transmission, is there's these little alignment dowels. Kind of hard to see, but one of them's right there, and there's one on the other side right there. And something to check before you've gotten to this point actually is make sure that those are in the engine side. A lot of times when you separate the engine and transmission, sometimes those can get stuck in the transmission, and you know, you might have one get stuck in the transmission and one stays in the engine, and that's not really that much of a problem if you're putting the same engine and transmission back together. But if it's like this situation where we're putting a new engine in, a replacement engine, make sure that you don't have like two alignment dowels in the engine and then like another one stuck in the transmission. Otherwise they'll be butting up against each other and you're not going to be able to get it lined up, and you'll be stuck wondering what the heck's going on. So just make sure to check that beforehand. And also make sure you have those alignment dowels in there. They are actually important. to keep the engine and transmission in a perfect alignment to the bolts. You get it looking pretty close to lined up, but not quite perfect. So make sure that you do have those in there. Okay, now when you're bolting up the flex plate to the torque converter here, if you've gotten them lined up pretty close already, then you should see it looking like this, where you can see the torque converter and threaded hole back here. But if it's not quite lined up, you can get in here with your finger and you should be able to turn the torque converter by hand pretty easily. If the torque converter is pressed up into the flex plate already and you can't move it, and that probably means your torque converter isn't seated properly in the transmission, and you're going to want to fix that before you continue, because if it's not lined up and this is like just forced up into it, you actually can damage the oil pump in the transmission as well as other components in there. So you should actually have a little bit of gap here in between the flex plate and torque converter, and you should be able to move it freely by hand. So you get that lined up. I like to use a little Loctite on those bolts. There we go. And get those lined up in there. And be careful that you don't drop them because they can be kind of a pain to retrieve out of the inside of the case here. And then
just like pretty hand snug
for now.
Yeah.
Which is what we're gonna do next. You want to leave them.
Turn it.
Yeah. Then we're gonna turn the whole assembly.
The whole crankshaft, right?
Yep. And turn out the crankshaft here, and rotate that over until the next hole shows up. And that's why you don't want to completely tighten anything until you have all of them in there, because you want to still be able to adjust things slightly to get the two holes lined up just right. And then once you've got all 4 bolts in, then you can go back around and actually torque them down.
Nice.
Okay, when you get to the point that you're gonna reattach your fuel lines. Make sure that you have the upper hose or hard line here connects to your filter. So that's the feed line in, and then and then the return line goes to the lower connection right down here. You don't want to get those mixed up. I've done that before, and it just ends up flooding the engine because it just pushes fuel past the injectors and just, you know, causes all kinds of problems. And it will not run that way. So yeah, so make sure you get those in the right order. And then the bottom one is the fuel vapor line that ends up going into the charcoal canister.
Never break, always fight, never quit, do it right, play the game, win it life, have no shame, there's no time, feel the pain, live the grind, I could change, in my mind, pick a lane, commit and climb, the only way to win it life. I never miss, that's fact, taking big swings, bitch, hand me the bat, put me in the ring, you'll go out in a bag, cause I sing what I mean and I bring it to the mad light. Ain't got time to kill, I got time to feel, I took the red pill, I know life's short so I wanna live real, but how's it supposed to feel? How's it supposed to feel? How's it supposed to feel?
Alright, first time trying to see if this motor cranks.
Okay, so here's startup attempt number 2. Try wiggling those connections at the battery.
Yeah.
We're gonna die.
It's pretty safe on like
Damn.
flowing perspective to
Oh yeah,
for that period of time.
yeah, that won't hurt anything running it for probably 3 seconds like that.